Hello everyone, Prime here, and I hope that you've enjoyed your day, because today we're going to be talking about Khepri, some facts about him, lore, and all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in that, then you're in the right place, and let's begin. Khepri may have been a hawk, or a man, with the head of a beetle, or just a beetle outright. If he was just an outright beetle, then he may have been a dung beetle, or an iridescent beetle. So these beetles were quite colourful and nice to look at. So the in-game Smite model for Khepri is close enough. It's got a bit of its own kind of aesthetic twist, but it's serviceable, it works. He was the physical manifestation of the dawn aspect of the sun, and there were 4 other aspects of the sun, who represented different kind of aspects or time of the day within the sun. So you have, of course, Khepri being the dawn, Ra being the noon, and Atum being the setting of the sun. But there was also an additional version of the sun being either Anum or Nefertum. Whether it was Anum or Nefertum, not too sure. They seem to be used a lot interchangeably, so it depends on which version of the myth you're going by, but there you go, yes. I'm not really going to mention Anum/Nefertum too much, though. Khepri was also known as the Shining One, and the one who is in the nun. His name originated from the ancient word Khepr, meaning to be transformed, to emerge, or to become. Khepru were transformations, and it was thought that Khepri created himself. You see, this was because scarab beetles kind of just rose up from the earth, or rose up out of dung balls, and the ancient Egyptians thought that this was quite incredible and that it reflected Khepri's ability to just create himself, which is why he's gifted with the ability to create himself. But going back to the Khepru, which were again transformations, human life was considered to be a series of Khepru, from old age to manhood to childhood. The transformation between becoming an old man, dying, and then turning into a very specific spirit, I'll leave the name of that on the screen, but we'll discuss that a little bit more in Osiris's video, because that is more relevant to Osiris than Khepri, but another transformation, Khepri was considered to be very helpful when it came to transformations. Specifically, the transformation between being an old man and dying. He was said to be able to be invoked to help quell the intense fear of death. So if you're ever doing something incredibly stupid, just remember Khepri's probably got your back. Probably. Also, because of this relationship with death, Khepri was considered to be the most popular Egyptian deity, or at least the symbol of the scarab was very, very popular at the very least. Over a period of around 2,500 years, millions of these scarab sort of amulets or little symbols could be found all across Egyptian mythology. Hell, even the symbol of Egyptian mythology is a scarab. Neith has a scarab somewhere in her design somewhere, and a lot of deities have some form of connection to the scarab, because the people of Egypt very much valued, well, you know, not dying. Khepri came with a promise that I am Khepri, my body parts will continue to exist, and this promise just made Khepri immensely popular. Khepri was considered to be responsible for the sun moving across the sky and the sun rising and setting each day. Although it was also said that Ra or Hathor, or the controller of Ra's sunship, was said to pull the sun across the sky every day. Khepri has also been credited with this because of dung beetles and the way in which they pull their stuff across the desert. You probably shouldn't think about the stuff too much that they pull across the desert. Khepri also had a connection to creative powers of the heart and was linked with the infant sun god, probably Ra. Not too sure if it actually was Ra, but it was probably Ra. The only reason why I mentioned it being Ra was because when Ra was separated from his mother, as an infant rather, he cried his eyes out. So, and he's the only other mention of an infant sun god besides perhaps Nefertum that I was able to find. So probably Ra, perhaps Nefertum, probably Ra, who began creation by rising out of primal waters. And Ra was lost in these primal waters, or he was just all alone in this dark place, hence why he was crying. So yeah, probably Ra. Before you go ahead and just lose all respect for Ra, though, consider that Ra was actually one of, if not the most powerful deities in Egyptian mythology, at least at one point. See, before Ra got old, Isis and a lot of the other deities greatly respected Ra's power and wouldn't dare try to directly overthrow him. But once he got old, Isis got a bit bold. You see, in Egyptian mythology, if you were able to know someone's real name or a deity's real name, you'd have absolute power over them. As such, Isis really wanted to know Ra's real name so that her son, Horus, could eventually become the king of Egypt. So she crafted a serpent from a bit of Ra's bodily parts and had it poison Ra. Ra was just admiring some of his creation at the time, thinking that he did a pretty sweet job at creating his surroundings, and then he was poisoned by a snake. Doesn't make Ra sound all that intelligent, does it? Though, to be fair, again, Ra was getting old, and he was an old man at this point. Also, that was the reason why Isis made the snake out of Ra's bodily parts, so that he wouldn't detect it coming, or that nothing would really be traced back to her, because deities that have felt the darker side of the all-powerful deity's wrath have not been too pleased about it. Just ask Hera. Ra, upon noticing that, ow, there's something very, very painful coursing through my veins, decided to call all of the gods, who were noticeably upset by this type of events. Of course, Isis was pretending to be upset because she couldn't just randomly show up smiling, but you get the point. Then Isis had a bit of a one-on-one talk with Ra and said, "I will heal you, but I need to know your real name." And Ra was all, "No. Do you not know who I am? I'm Ra." And he went on to say that in the morning he was Khepri, in the noon he was Ra, and in the afternoon he was Atum. Hence why I'm even telling you this story, because of the connection to Khepri. After a bit more protesting, and Isis being a bit more cunning and devious with her words, she eventually got Ra to tell her his real name. I'm sure that contributed to Horus becoming the king, or a king, of either a part of Egypt or the entirety of Egypt. Because ultimately, Horus becomes either the king of Lower Egypt, which is quite close to the Nile, it's full of most of a good chunk of the Egyptian civilization, and Set got the other half, he got Upper Egypt, which was full of desert, but still societies of Egypt, I'm sure. Or if that didn't happen, Horus got the entirety of Egypt to rule over. Whereas Osiris, of course, by the end of this also rules over the dead. So there's that. Getting slightly off topic, but there you go. Also, another thing that you might find interesting is that the aspects of the solar deities often formed pairs with each other. For instance, Atum Khepri underwent daily transformations, but was worshipped regularly. And also, Atum Khepri, I believe it was also may have been responsible for the creation of the entire universe, because he may have been credited as being the original creator. Only mentioning this because there's some Egyptian text or other that mentions the original creator having the head of a beetle, and so it may have been Atum Khepri, but the original creator was considered to be Atum. I'm not going to go into details as to how the original creator began creating things, because it's a bit, well, it's a bit nasty. I actually posted on Twitter. I suppose I posted on Twitter. Okay, let's just say it involves solo action and indirect womanly charms, shall we say. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, good. Also, just so you get a bit more of a sense of Khepri's kit synergy, because Khepri's kit, it's probably one of the most law-abiding kits in, models and designs, just overall everything in Smite. Minus his one. If his one kind of was a push rather than a pull, it would be perfect, but because it's a pull, it's like, okay. But I suppose we have enough pushes in the game for now. But yeah, Khepri was said to rise again at every single dawn, which is, works quite well with his ult being able to, revive people. So I thought that was pretty nice to mention. Also, Khepri had no temples whatsoever, even though I said that the Scarab Beetle was probably the single most popular item, creature, you name it, in Egyptian mythology. Instead, though, most if not every temple did have these giant beetle statues built into them. And one of these temples in particular, where a cult of Atum Ra usually gathered, was said to be able to manipulate, or through the power of rituals, turn one of these temples, giant beetles, into the actual Khepri. And it was said that this statue could bestow a number of gifts onto us if we were to interact with them in a certain way. For women, for instance, if you're having trouble with childbirth, well, if you just touch the statue, boom, trouble's over. And for tourists, it was said that if you were to walk around the statue 3 times, any wish you desire would come true. Whether you can actually go out in the world and test it out for yourself, I'm not 100% sure. I've never been to Egypt, and I haven't even looked into this myth too much, beyond the fact that it was just a myth. But there you go. I'll leave you guys to think about that one for yourselves. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I hope that you did enjoy. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. If you didn't, it's a bit of a pity. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. And I was going to make Thor instead of Khepri, but the thing is, you might get a bit of a low-key deal with Thor, not just because Thor Ragnarok's coming out in the next few weeks. Part of the reason I am going to be making a bit more Thor content, just because of the movie and, you know, cashing in, but decided to put Khepri here just because the Thor video was packed with a bit more information than I usually expect. See, normally when I write up a script, I don't actually write up scripts anymore, I just kind of have notes instead of chunky paragraphs of information. And, well, I have almost about 1,000 words of notes for Thor. And just so if you want a bit of a reference, this video was about 450 or so words of notes. So you can imagine Thor's video pretty lengthy. His myths, I've only included about 1 or 2 of his stories in there. So there may be another video, similar to Loki's stuff, how I pretty much had the entirety of his videos just be myths and stories about Loki. Gonna get a similar thing for Thor in part 2 of his lore videos. So stay tuned for that, and if there's a specific god that you'd like to see me cover sooner